Open with me 1 Samuel chapter 17. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 32 through 37. If you have NLT version, open that please. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 32 through 37. So today's topic that I want to speak about is faithfulness begins where you are. And somebody said that faithfulness begins at home. That's where you need to show that you are faithful. David's story, his victories didn't begin in the battlefield, on the battlefield. His victories began on the field where he was tending his father's sheep. Before David was ever a famous king or a giant slayer, he was a nobody with an insignificant job. He was absolutely nobody. His father thought that he is not worthy to be the king. His brother saw in him a lazy boy who just left the sheep behind and came to the battlefield to just saw the battle. Maybe you are nobody right now with a thankless job. You have an insignificant job where nobody sees your work, nobody cares about your work. So whatever you do, you may feel that you are not at the right place. You are not being directed by God. Part of God raising anyone usually involves with an obscure position, with a very insignificant job. For example, see Joseph. His work began, his faithfulness started to shine in the midst of all those difficulties. He used to be his father's, the apple of his father's eyes. But he was a nobody before he became somebody, before he was very insignificant, before he became the most significant authority in the world or in Egypt. Abraham, he began his journey how? Wandering in the desert. Job, before he became the mightiest faithful person or the example of faithfulness, you see how he had to go through a lot of different trials. You see Jesus began his victory before he won the victory over the cross. He began in the wilderness, in the desert, with very insignificant temptations. You see the disciples, before they became fisher of man, they were fishermen. They used to catch fish. So you may have a job where you seem like nobody appreciates, nobody praises, or the job that you have is not really worth the praises from the world. But don't worry about it, because David was not trained on the battlefield. He was trained in the fields where he was tending the sheep. That's where we are trained, where you think that your patience is tried, where you think that you are working and serving with among people or the students that you are teaching, or the church that you are serving. Nobody appreciates your job. That's where you are being trained. That's where David was being trained. He says when he goes to the battlefield, his father sends him to the battlefield. But before the battlefield, you see that David was the youngest of his 8 brothers. 3 of his brothers, they were already serving in the military or in the forces of King Saul. And when you remember when Jesse was called by Samuel visited Jesse, and he told Jesse that one of your sons is going to be anointed by God. He has chosen one of your sons to be the king of Israel. Jesse called all the 7 sons except David. He didn't even thought that David was worthy to become the king. But Bible says that God does not see the physical appearance, the outward appearance. God sees the heart. And David's faithfulness began in the field where he was tending these insignificant sheep that were of not much value. That's where he was trained. And he became a very, very important person in the history of God's work. That David's name is mentioned the most in the Bible whenever it comes to Jesus. Jesus is always considered the descendant of David. That's how God elevated him. But he didn't begin all big. He didn't begin with all that he had, all the glory and all the praise. He became with a very insignificant job. Instead of trash, David was, you may think that your life is cleaning up the trash or being janitor, cleaning the toilets. These jobs are not important jobs. They are important. They are important for the environment. They are important for our health. So all those people who do these jobs, they may think that it's not important, but they are very important in God's sight. So David didn't have to clean the trash, but he was tending the smelly sheep. He began taking care of the sheep, and David's brothers were called when the prophet came down to anoint, but David was not. David was tending the sheep. And David could have complained that why my father is not really paying much attention to me. We don't see David complaining about those things. That father called the meeting, and he didn't even think that I was worthy to be the king. He didn't complain. He didn't groan about it. He didn't complain to his father that all the other sons are in the battlefield or they are in the forces. They have a name. They have a position, and I'm here. You have sent me to tend the sheep. He didn't groan about it. He didn't complain about it. What he did is he faithfully tended the sheep. And the Bible says, on one occasion, a lion came to attack sheep. Considering the situation, we would have just ran away if we are taking care of the sheep. I would run away. What would you do? If you see that you're tending sheep and there is a lion coming, what would you do? Run away. Save your life. But David, that insignificant sheep that the lion attacked, David did not even want that sheep to be killed. What did David do? David fought the lion. And the Bible says that he grabbed the lion by the hair and struck it and killed it. He grabbed the lion by his hair. We wouldn't even go like at least 100 feet closer to the lion. We would find the highest place where the lion would not climb and try maybe to throw stones at the lion to shush the lion off or scare the lion off. But David didn't do that. He was a responsible shepherd, and he knew that every little sheep was important to him. So he risked his life to save that insignificant sheep that was not really important. His father, what do you think is important to Jesse? Life of David or life of the sheep? He could have like 1,000 more sheep later, but he couldn't have his son David again. He may have other sons, but he may never have David. I know we're 11 children, but my mom and my dad, they loved every single one of us. You may think that it's a big family. So if one person is missing, the parents may not even notice. But no, they do notice. When we get together, we are 55. Just my brothers, sisters, their children. We're 55. But every single one of is important. Even in the last years of my father's life when I was there, all the brothers and sisters came, and one of his grandson's son didn't come, and he asked him why he's not there. Out of those like 50, I wouldn't even pay attention. But father cares. Jesse cared more about David than the sheep. And he knew his father's heart. But he knew that he was responsible for that every little sheep When his father gave him that responsibility, he had to be faithful even with that little. Picture yourself grabbing a lion by hair and striking it. Or a bear. David says on another occasion, a bear attacked sheep and he killed the bear. Think about it. Nobody knew about David's these accomplishments, how he risked his life to save the sheep. He was not looking praises from the people. There were no people singing songs of David that he was a lion killer or he was a bear killer or he was a responsible shepherd. He was not looking praises. He knew that this was his job and he had to do it faithfully. Whatever your job is, wherever you are, that's where your faithfulness needs to begin. And that's where you need to have the victory. You don't need to go to the battlefield to gain victory. You need to fight the battles that you are already engaged in your homes, at your work, at your schools, wherever you are. That's where the faithfulness needs to shine. I was, a couple of months ago, we were at church. On rare occasions, we get the permission to use the kitchen at Juan Church. Foreign ministries cannot use the kitchen because it's always busy. So we had to warm food. It's Pakistani rice. We had to warm that. And my boys, I asked for the permission to warm the rice. It was like 40 people, food for 40 people. And they were warming and few pieces of rice fell around the stove, and I was asking them to pick every little piece. What do you call rice? Rice grain. I told them to pick every little rice grain, and they were saying, "Hi, they're just few pieces. Why do we have to clean everything up?" And I told them, we got the permission because we clean it. You don't clean it now. You think there are few pieces, but our credibility is dependent on those few pieces, that few grains that you leave behind. You have to pick up every little grain. You have to do your job faithfully. Unless we start treating those little things and take them, we begin with taking everything seriously and start paying attention to every little detail, we will never be responsible for anything big in our lives. Jesus said to his disciples that if you cannot be faithful with the little, you will never be responsible for the big things. So those who cannot be faithful with the little things, be it your home, be it your workplace, or be your church, you will never be responsible for the big things. We see that David, when he went to the battlefield, his father sent him to the battlefield to deliver food to the people. And as soon as he goes to the battlefield, he sees all those people, this giant. He comes for 40 days and nights. He comes and he challenges the Philistines. Philistines, when they march from home to the battlefield, you know how they marched? They marched with the songs of praises. But as soon as they come to the battlefield, all their faith is gone. They're completely smeared with fear of this giant who comes and who challenges them, that anyone who has the guts, let him come and fight me. If he kills me, we will retreat from here. If I kill them, if I kill one of your soldiers, then you will retreat. You will accept the defeat. David saw the Goliath. First, he asked, who is he? And he was told by one of the soldiers, he is their mighty champion. And King Saul has said that anybody who kills this Goliath, this champion, I will not only give him great reward, I will give him one of my daughters, and I will exempt his family from the yearly tax. His life is going to be secured in my kingdom. His family is going to have a very good position in my kingdom. And as he was talking, he was asking a lot of questions to these soldiers. His oldest brother comes and he rebukes him. You lazy boy, you just deceiver. You have come here to just watch the battle. Where are the few sheep that you are supposed to be taking care of? David says, I'm not here to just enjoy the battle. I'm here because Father sent me to deliver the food. And then David's word reaches King Saul. And King Saul sends for David. And David comes before King Saul. And you know what he says to King Saul? And this is really amazing. He says to him, don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I'll go and fight him. And Saul says, don't be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. You are just a boy. And David's response is beautiful, that God has trained me for the giants, not maybe on the battlefield, but the field where I tend my sheep. God who delivered me from the jaws of the lion, God who delivered me from the paws of the bear, He will deliver me from this giant. And he says, who is this Philistine who's challenging the armies of the God of heaven, armies of the Israelites, the God's set apart people. Who is this man? He says that the Lord is going to deliver him into my hands today. King Saul didn't see that. But King Saul then, because there was no other man who was stepping up, he took a shot in David and he gave David this responsibility. He says, he agrees. He says, okay, if you really are adamant that you will fight, you go and fight. May God be with you. David didn't have this victory on the battlefield. He started with very little, very insignificant job of being shepherd. Today, whatever you want to do, whatever dreams you have, don't wait for those dreams. Listen, if you have 1,001 and you cannot give 101 to the Lord from 1,001, don't think that when you have $1 million you will give to the Lord. You won't give. If you cannot give God 101, you won't give God $1 million. Trust me. The more wealth you acquire, the more tight-fisted you are going to become. So wherever you are, whatever jobs that you have, if you can't be faithful with that, don't think that if God gives you a bigger position, you can manage those things better than you can manage your home now. If you can't clean your house faithfully, cleaning every spot faithfully, honestly, don't think that you will have a job or you will be a CEO of a company where you will run a company of the cleanliness, or company where you have your 100 of servants are working under you. Begin with whatever you have, but be faithful. Do what you can. Martin Luther King Jr., he said that a shoemaker, when he makes shoes, a Christian shoemaker, his faithfulness is not demonstrated by putting crosses on the shoes, beautiful crosses, and putting crosses on the shoes. His faithfulness is demonstrated in the best craftsmanship. God is interested in your best craftsmanship, not by decorating the shoes with the crosses. You have to do your job faithfully. And one thing that I really, really like about Korean work is everything is very detailed. Every single thing is very detailed. Same work is done by Pakistanis, and you could see the significant differences. In furniture, you would see that every little detail and how neatly they pay attention to everything. And you see that how sloppy work is done by the Pakistanis. They would find the shortcuts. They would always find an easy way out. Or in the short time, in little time, they want to do a lot more work. So Korea is developed because people had this desire to make their country one of the wealthiest countries. They had this desire that if they want good for their nation, they have to be faithful to every little thing that they do. And I'm really, I've been to many churches, and every church, especially big churches, they have some people they have hired to clean the churches. But Juan church, you go to the toilet. Every toilet never smells bad. Toilet, you would see that even the toilet are cleaned as if they are doing the work of the Lord. That's how we need to work. That's how, whatever jobs that we have, teaching, teach it. Teach your children as if you are doing the work of the Lord, and by your every word that you teach them, you are impressing that child with the faithfulness of the Lord. You are responsible to show that you are a servant of the Lord wherever you are. If you're an accountant, do your job well. If you're a student, study well. Do all that you can as if you are doing for the Lord, not people. And do not seek the praises and appreciation and rewards from the people, but seek the joy of the Lord, that when you clean your house, the Lord is happy that you have done your job so well. If you write a paper as if you are writing it for the Lord and seeking reward and joy of the Lord, that you've been faithful with the little, and trust the Lord's word. If you are faithful with little, God will make you responsible for a lot more things. God bless you. And